Hello and welcome. This is datoneman here, and today I'm going to be talking about my draft analysis for the upcoming Safari Zone League, which is a draft league that was recently started. This is going to be our first season going into it, and basically I'm just going to be going over the 11 mons that I've drafted for the season, kind of talking about their roles, the reason behind my drafting for them, things like that, just so I set a precedence for the rest of the weeks that I'm going to be playing. So, a couple things about the draft league that if you don't know, draft league is where you essentially draft some number of Pokemon, where each one has a certain tier placement, and you can only draft a certain number of tiers. So you can only, the stronger the Pokemon, typically you can only draft less of those, but the weaker Pokemon, you can typically draft more of those. So you end up getting a lot of teams with a lot of variety, and very not often do you get teams that look very similar from season to season. So that's basically what it is. It's essentially like a fantasy draft for Pokemon, and it's really interesting. I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't. But kind of getting to what is a little different about Safari Zone as a draft league is that Safari Zone actually unbans a couple of Pokemon that are usually not seen in draft play. For example, Pokemon such as the Mega Lotties are one thing, Mega Metagross, which has been banned for a very long time now. Stuff like Deoxys Speed, Deoxys Defense, stuff like Genesect, just these Pokemon you don't get to see a whole lot of. And I think that's a really interesting concept. The fact that these Pokemon are going to be allowed in draft play. And I think it's going to be an interesting time just to see how broken these Pokemon are at times. They might go back to being banned, I'm not going to lie. Some of these I think are a little too powerful for the draft meta anyway, but we're going to go on. We're going to see how it goes around, and after this first season, there will likely be some changes to the ban list and all that kind of thing, but for now, we're just going to go for it. We're just going to see how it plays out. So, going into it, I was picked number 5 out of 16, which is pretty good. 5 isn't super great or anything. If I wanted an earlier draft position, I would have liked somewhere in top 3, top 4. But 5 is pretty good, all things considered. I got a pretty quick decision on what I want my top tier to be, and I definitely wanted a top tier in this, just because even though there's enough for everyone to get, I just wanted something that I personally really wanted. So, just a couple things that I wanted for my first pick. I really wanted something that just something fun to play around with, I feel. And that really boiled down to about 2 mons that I really felt like would be really good in the meta. And those 2 Pokemon were Magearna and Tapu Lele. Now, Tapu Lele obviously being one of the strongest wall breakers and just overall powerhouses in Pokemon ever with Psychic's terrain. But I also thought about the defensive counterpart to that of Magearna. Magearna being one of the best defensive Pokemon in the metagame. I just think would be really good. It could really slot on a lot of different styles of teams, whether it be defensive, balanced. I can even go offensive with Shift Gear, Calm Mind. So I really had to make a decision, what kind of approach I really want. I can go very much in one direction with Tapu Lele, but I could go I can dabble a little in both, if you know what I mean, if I pick Magearna. So, for my first pick, I did end up getting Magearna. Now, Magearna, as I said before, is one of the best Pokemon ever introduced in the history of Pokemon, and a lot of characteristics add up to that. Steel Fairy obviously is one of the best defensive typings in the game. It resists a lot of things in the metagame, such as common offensive types such as Dragon, such as Fairy, such as even to a lesser extent stuff like Grass, Poison, just little things like that I think are really good, and Dark especially. And the fact that Dark resists in Magearna is really amazing for that reason. Offensively, not as much. I don't think Steel Fairy is that good offensively, but Magearna has good ways to supply its offensive pressure with, say, Bolt Beam coverage, and Ice Beam Thunderbolt. It has options to set up in Sheath Gear or Calm Mind, and just these are obviously just standard options you've seen OU, but they're really going to be effective here in draft format, I think. And just even talking about Magearna sets, it's pretty well-rounded for the most part. It's a little slow, granted, but nothing Shift Gear 2 can't fix. I can, appropriately adjust my EVs for that purpose. So I think Magearna is going to be a really awesome addition to my thing. The one thing is a little, how should I say? One thing that's really that kind of holds Magearna back in this format, or at least in this draft league anyway, is that because Magearna was put into S tier, which is going to be the tier with the unbans. There was a rule made that you cannot draft an S tier with a Z crystal, meaning I cannot use Magearna with something like Electrium Z, Therium Z, Steelium Z. You know, I can't put any kind of Z crystal on it, which I don't think is really that big of a problem. It obviously takes away from Magearna's ability to be an offensive powerhouse, but at the same time, Magearna has some great options in items. That's stuff like Assault Vest, which you see on which is its most common set in OU at the moment. Something like a Resist Berry, like Shuka, can be really amazing as well. And, you know, I think this can just be really good. I can even mess around with something like Specs, for instance. Like, I don't know, just a little fun thing to see. But, yeah, I think Magearna is a really great addition. I think its ability to check most Pokemon in the game is just something that I think is going to be so valuable. So, Magearna is definitely something that I really wanted going into this draft league. So a couple things that so now I have to pick the other 10 mons in the draft, you know, and Magearna being in S tier, and because S tiers were only allowed to be picked as free agents, I had to fulfill my other requirements. So my tier 1 through 5, I had to fulfill those requirements, having one of each except for tier 3, which I needed 2 of. So I thought about it a little bit, and I thought, Magearna is weak to only 2 types, those being ground and fire, 2 very big weaknesses, seeing as they're some of the most offensive and common offensive types in the game. So thinking about that, I was like, okay, I wanted something that resisted both of those. I need at least 2 or 3 mons that, or at least 2 mons that resisted fire and ground. Just because I think with that, I think Magearna would be that much harder to kill, just because I have those fire resist, those ground resist in the back. And, you know, most teams have good fire and ground resist anyway. So, you know, I wasn't like crippling myself just because I was picking fire and ground resist, you know what I mean? So going into this, from tier 1, I saw 2 very clear standout picks from it. Well, a couple, actually. The 3 tier 1s that I was considering heavily was Zygarde 50, because it's a Z abuser, it is a ground type, it's also a dragon type, so it helps me with those fire types. It also can help me deal with ground types a little bit, not that much, to be honest. Zygarde's probably not too great against ground types. The second option I really was thinking about was Landorus T, but because I'm 5th pick and I have to wait until the Snake Draft goes all the way back up, I ended up not getting Zygarde or Landorus T. Those two would have been really nice because Landorus T is one of the best fire checks in the game, having Intimidate to check the physical fire types, as well as having a strong Earthquake to back it up as well. So at that point, I was kind of boiling it down to 2 other mons in OU that I think were really good to complement Magearna, and those were the Lati twins. Now, the decision for me came down to what I wanted more for the team. Latios is obviously better for offensive pressure. Both are similar. Both are extremely similar Pokemon. Both fairly strong, Latios being a tiny bit stronger, but Latios is a tiny bit bulkier. And that little bit of bulk, I think, is what made me end up picking Latios over Latios. I also choose Latios in my previous draft run in Cascade Draft League Season 3. So I decided, okay, let's try Latios out for a little bit. Now, Latios, of course, is a fantastic Pokemon as well. It's very similar to Latios. It's a tiny bit weaker, but it still has most, if not all, the strengths that Latios does, having Dragon Psychic being a very good defensive typing to pair with Magearna, resisting both the ground types and the fire types that Magearna doesn't like. Latios doesn't like the dark types, doesn't like the dragon and fairy types. Magearna can sponge those hits very well for Latios, I feel. And Latios really, it's great because it also brings team support in the form of Defog, which is a very common thing for it to have. Strong Draco Meteors, Calm Mind if I really wanted it to go that route, and just, what's another option I can go with Latios? Tailwind? I don't know. So it's just an example of something that can be offensively pretty good. 110 is definitely not super strong, but it's fairly good, you know. Not a lot of things want to switch into Draco from a 110 special attack Pokemon, so Latias I think is going to be great. It is not my Z abuser, however. I did not put Latias as my Z captain simply because I don't feel like it's going to be that great at abusing it as much as Latios is. And I'm mainly going to be using this as like a pivot support Pokemon. So Latias I think is one thing that's going to be really great for the team as well. So going into round 3 for my picks, I didn't have to wait too long because I was number 5. And just thinking about it, I was like, okay, let's see if I can get another Fire Ground Resist. At this point, I needed something like Stealth Rock. I wanted at least 2 other forms of hazard removers, and I wanted at least like 3 stealth rockers at least, so something to keep in mind a little bit as I keep going on here. But so I went about it and I was like, okay, maybe I should go for a mega right now because this is about the time when people are kind of starting to think about megas. So I was like, okay, better grab my mega that I want like ASAP, because if I don't get it, then it's not going to be again going to be dealt a mega that I don't really want, and it's not going to be good for the entire party. So I thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, okay, at this point the team is a little lacking in power, but Latias being 110 speed is not bad, but I figured a speedy Pokemon like Mega Aerodactyl would be very, very helpful to the team. Now, I think speed is probably the most important stat in Pokemon ever. And when you have a Pokemon as fast as Aerodactyl, you can delegate speed EVs a little differently. I don't need to run Jolly max speed anymore. I can run a certain amount of speed and go like Adamant Nature just to still outspeed certain Pokemon, but still pack a little bit of a punch. And that's what's Aerodactyl's main flaw in competitive play, is that it's a little weak. Despite a 135 attack stat, despite Tough Claws and everything, it doesn't hit that hard. But what Aerodactyl does really nicely for this thing is, first of all, it gives me Stealth Rock, and it also gives me a secondary Defogger. It also has, again, just a really good speed stat, and in a tier where, or in a meta where some Ubers such as Pheromosa and other very, very fast Pokemon are allowed, I think having Aerodactyl is going to be really great for the team. Aerodactyl, of course, has strong options such as Stone Edge as long as it connects. It also has the ability to Stall Break or just disrupt status moves with Taunt. And again, it's just ridiculously fast. Like I only need to invest like this much to outspeed, base 110s and all that kind of thing. So I think Aerodactyl is going to be really great for the team. Looking forward to using this thing a lot too. And so, yeah, so moving on with it, I have now 2 fire and ground resists. And I was like, okay, let's think of other team supports for the team. So a couple things that I was thinking about was, I was liking the idea of hazard stacking, because hazard stacking plus Magearna is just phenomenal. I think it's going to be phenomenal because Magearna's ability Soul Heart will kick in, and even if Magearna doesn't get a KO and my opponent dies to Stealth Rock or Spikes, Magearna still gets that special attack boost. So I was thinking to myself, alright, I want Spikes, I want Toxic Spikes, I want some kind of hazard stacking so I can, really get this team kicking, So I was looking through it and I was just like, I don't want to use, I was kind of thinking about a tier 2 Pokemon at this point, but I was like, I'll just wait on that a little bit, because in my opinion, tier 2 is a little hard to draft for. So I was like, I'll just put it off, because tier 2, there are a lot of good mons, but I wouldn't say a lot of value mons for tier 2 in my opinion. So I was like, okay, I'll just wait for tier 2 for a little bit, and let's start thinking about tier 3 and below. So tier 3 and below, one Pokemon I really, really wanted, and a lot of the guys will tell you this because I was talking about it on the chat for a little bit, but I really wanted Greninja for the team. And Greninja, Torrent form, obviously. The other 2 forms are S tier, so I wouldn't be able to pick them because I already have an S tier in Magearna. And I wanted that because it gives me a very good Suicide Lead Pokemon, it gives me both forms of Spikes, and it also gives me a pretty good Z user, because Greninja's not only fast, it's decently powerful to an extent, so I knew I could use that really well, but unfortunately Greninja actually got sniped from me, right before me actually. The pick before me, someone picked Greninja, so I was like, dang, okay, well I guess I'll have to set up for something a little different. Still a water type, still a Pokemon that gets both forms of hazards, and that Pokemon is Cloyster, for tier 3, which I think is not bad. I could definitely rock with Cloyster a little bit. Cloyster, one of its best strengths, as I said before, is its ability to go for Toxic Spikes and Spikes. That's Toxic. There we go. Cloyster, obviously, it's a niche pick in Ubers as well, because its ability to act as a Suicide Lead. And just overall, it can sweep late game teams with something like Shell Smash, Icicle Spear. Icicle Spear in particular is a very good move. Helps me break sashes, helps me get off all that extra chip damage for Pokemon like Magearna and Aerodactyl, who aren't very strong on their own, but with chip damage and with Pokemon wearing down to about 60-50%, I can, much easily KO them. So that's that's a reason why I brought Cloyster. Another reason why Cloyster I feel like is very nice is because it gives me a Rapid Spinner. Typically I'm not one to use Rapid Spin a whole lot, but on a team that has Spikes and Toxic Spikes, And especially since I'm using Cloyster as more of a lead type Pokemon, I don't want to defog too frequently. I'll still have it in the back, obviously. I don't need to bring Cloyster every week and all that kind of thing, but if I do bring it, I would rather have Rapid Spin over something like defog, just because defog gets rid of everything. I don't want to get rid of all the hard work I went through to get up those spikes, So having Rapid Spin is definitely a really nice thing for Cloyster. And that's pretty much all I have to say about Cloyster. Is just it gets up hazards for me. It can also do shell smashing shenanigans, of course. It's just solid Pokemon, It's a nice Pokemon to have around. So after I picked Cloyster, that's one tier 3 down. And at this point, I was thinking more about like what else do I want for the team at this point. At this point, I also wanted a ground type because round 4, I was like, all the good ground types are going. As I said before, Landorus T is going, Zygarde 50 is going, among some other ground types that were like pretty much disappearing because people are picking them already. So I was like, what can I get as a value mon that is a pretty strong ground type, is decently fast, can give me a little bit of support, and can just help me deal with the opposing steel types. That was one big issue that I had at this point, was just that my team wasn't very good against steel types, like really fast steel types. So because of that, I went for Flygon in tier 3. And as you can see, this is going to be my Z Crystal captain in my tier 3 Flygon. And how Z captains work here is, so long as you pick 2 Z captains, but their tier sums cannot be less than 6. So in other words, you can do like 2 tier 3 Pokemon, 1 tier 1, 1 tier 5, 1 tier 2, 1 tier 4, but you can't do like 1 tier 1 and 1 tier 3, for example. Because that's 4, that'll be less than 6, obviously. So what does Flygon do for the team? Flygon obviously is pretty much my only offensive ground type. Flygon is nice as a Scarfer. It gets Dragon Dance, just little things like that. Having U-turn is pretty nice in a format where my opponent needs to kind of make a guessing game about what set I'm bringing, so I can fake something and then U-turn out, get momentum on my favor. Again, having a strong Earthquake is also really nice, boosted by something like Groundium Z or a Dragon Dance, perhaps, is going to be really nice. And another very, not underlooked I'd say, but definitely a really good quality about Flygon is that it gets Defog. So that does make my 3rd Defogger, and I just realized I drafted 4 hazard removers in a row. What's going on with me? I'm all over the place. But Flygon, it's not a bad pick for sure. For tier 3, it's not too bad, I think. Gives me another dragon as well, so double dragon again. A packet of power on this team, just a little bit. So Flygon, offensive ground type, mainly going to be used as like a glue of sorts, kind of like a nice late game revenge killer. Once stuff has been worn down with spikes, once like a main wall breaker has done its job, things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much Flygon's job as of right now. So going back up, so now the draft has gone back to number 1. Number 1 make their wheel pick, and now it's going back down to me, and I had a little bit of time to think. So I was like, I do pretty okay versus steel types now, not too badly. That's another thing on my team, really resists steel at this point. So I was like, okay, I want something else that can hit steel types really hard. I want a fire type. I want something that can hit not only from the physical side, but also on the special side. Because at this point, I've kind of drafted a few physical mons and a few special mons at this point. So I was like thinking, okay, let's get another special fire type mon, or let's just get a fire type that can hit hard, is decently fast, can nab a lot of KOs on the strong steel types in the tier. Stuff like Mega Metagross, for example, is going to be a really big hassle to get rid of. And so for that reason, I decided to pick my second free agent, my first being Magearna, and my second one being Salazzle in tier 3. So Salazzle is an interesting Pokemon because Poison Fire is an interesting defensive typing. It resists stuff like Steel, for instance. I'm not going to be switching Salazzle into Steel type moves unless I'm running defensive Salazzle, which I guess I could, but I don't know about that. So anyway, what's one thing good about Salazzle? Well, Salazzle is a very fast Pokemon for one thing. 117 speed is definitely nothing to laugh at. Speed's alive stuff like Thundurus, Starmie, Raikou, Lottie is obviously for those 2 people that have drafted Mega Lotties. And with a Z Crystal especially, this thing can be a very big menace. Poison Fire with stuff like Sludge Wave and Fire Blast, for example, is very difficult to switch into. Not a lot of Pokemon can switch into Poison Fire coverage super easily, and with a pretty good special attack stat at that. Another cool thing about Salazzle is that in combination with Corrosion, and because Toxic never misses with Poison types, I essentially get off a free Toxic every single time with this thing. So I can do something like, say, Toxic Protect, Toxic Sub, so I can get a little bit of chip damage on some of my opponent's fatter Pokemon. Stuff like that. So that Salazzle can really help not only as an offensive threat, but also you don't always want to keep switching in defensive Pokemon, because if you get caught with a Toxic, it's going to be a little bit of a problem, because now you're going to take 6% for your first turn, and then if I Protect, you're going to take 12%. So you're going to have to... I'm forcing my opponents to play a little carefully when it comes to dealing with Salazzle and its Toxics. So that's one thing. Obviously, you also get something like Nasty Plot, Will-O-Wisp. I think it also gets Taunt, if I'm not mistaken. Let's check right now, actually. It does get Taunt, so yeah, just little fun things to see there. Definitely can help a lot. And like I said, it's just a strong Pokemon. I don't even need to go Poison EMZ. I can go like Fire EMZ, for example, and just nuke something right off the bat with a strong Fire Blast or Overheat. So yeah, that's Salazzle for you. And now, I was kind of thinking, alright, well, I'm doing pretty okay versus Steels. What I'm not doing too hot versus, I believe, are ground types. I realize at this point I don't have a single ground resist. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't have a single 1,000 arrows resist. That's what I really meant. I don't have a good 1,000 arrows resist, and someone did pick Zygarde 50%, so I was thinking, shoot, maybe I should just get a sturdy ground resist for a little bit, and this is where I decided to pick my tier 2 Pokemon. And I think I did make the right call on this. Waiting for tier 2 I think was a good play, because at this point I was like, this is a perfectly fine tier 2 for me. It also gives me a fighting resist, which I kind of do need at this point, considering how Salazzle isn't the best versus fighting types. Aerodactyl is decent because it has like wing attack to hit the fighting types, but it's not super good. My best bet is like Latios, which can switch in kinda to most fighting types. 90 defense is okay, definitely, but I wanted something a little bulkier, and I decided to go with Celebi, which is unfortunately another psychic type, but Celebi does do some things for me. For one, it is the grass type that I needed for the team, because I needed a ground resist, and I believe stuff like, what's it called? I think stuff like Amoonguss was already taken from me, so I was like, you know what, I'll try out Celebi for a bit. Celebi, very well-rounded stats, obviously. Gets very good moves as well. For one thing, it gives me the second Stealth Rocker that I always wanted on the team, so there we go. I have a Stealth Rocker that is a little bulkier than Aerodactyl, which is really good. It's something that can consistently switch in, heal off damage easily with Recover. Some other things that Celebi can do, I can Baton Pass. I can't Baton Pass speed in this, unfortunately, but I can Baton Pass stuff like Calm Mind Boost, Nasty Plot Boost, just little things like that. And I think Celebi is going to be really nice for that. Celebi also has a niche option in Healing Wish. This is another thing that Latios has that I don't think I pointed out earlier, but Healing Wish is also really nice. On a team where, let's say, I bring in a sweeper, I dent the team for a little bit, and I don't have to sack my sweeper at that point, because I can bring back Celebi or Latios, click Healing Wish, bring back the sweeper that my opponent thought was going to be gone, and now I have essentially a second shot at dealing with my opponent's team. So I think Healing Wish is a really nice option on Celebi. Again, well-rounded stats. I can go physical if I really wanted to. I don't know if I will, but it's an option. I'll make something work with that kind of thing. So Celebi is going to be really nice. Primary ground resist, primary ground resist to an extent. Fighting resist, another water resist, which is really nice for the team, especially since my one water resist is Latios, which is pretty good, and then my second one's Cloyster, which is not a super good Pokemon I want to switch in all the time, because again, I want to use that as a lead mostly, and just to get up hazards and maybe sweep occasionally. So Celebi is going to be really nice for the team. It does pair really nice with the team as of right now, because I have good fire resist, I have good Magearna resists a bunch of the stuff that Celebi is weak to. Again, dark, as well as the bug types as well. So that's going to be really nice for Celebi. And now at this point, I was like, okay, team seems okay. At this point, I was more about just adding roles and just kind of seeing like, what else can my team need at this point. So I decided I'd get another Steel Resist. Or not another Steel Resist. Well, It is another steel resist, but still has, not the best steel resist in the world. So I decided to get probably one of the best tier 4s that you can get, honestly, and that's Seismitoad. I really like Seismitoad as a tier 4 Pokemon. It's extremely bulky. It's like a discount Swampert in a sense. Not totally, obviously, because Swampert is a lot stronger. It gets... I think it gets Roar over it or something like that, but the main thing that I like more about Seismitoad is that Seismitoad has a better ability in almost every situation, and that's Water Absorb. Water Absorb gives me a water immunity as opposed to a resist, and that's really great for the team, because again, I don't have the best water resist in the world as of right now. My two best ones are Latias and Celebi, and having a third water resist / immunity in Seismitoad is going to be really nice for the team. This also gives me my third Stealth Rocker for the team, which is really good. Seismitoad is just a Pokemon that I think is going to be really nice just because of its bulk. It's not super easy to take this thing down. Now, granted, it's not the most offensively oriented, and it's not as, super fat as something like, say, Gastrodon. But, regardless of that, I believe Seismitoad has very good merits. It has decent offensive options. It also has a niche Swift Swim option if I really wanted to go for that. I don't know if I will, but it's up there, I suppose. Gets support moves like Knock Off. Scald obviously being one of the best moves in the game to burn stuff. Again, just having another water type is basically the what it's like the bulky water that most, if not all, draft teams should have, in my opinion. I feel like if you don't have a bulky water, or at least like some form of water type on your team, I think you're doing a small disservice to yourself. So I think just Seismitoad is going to be a really great option. Yeah, not much to it, if I'm honest with you. It has ground water coverage, which is awesome. Helps me it also gives me another electric immunity, which is really good because stuff like Tapu Koko in the tier, which someone has drafted, stuff like, say, Manectric, I think someone drafted that already. Those strong electric types, I want something to, keep those in check, make sure those things don't go too haywire. And I think Seismitoad does that very nicely. So, yeah, that's Seismitoad for a tier 4. Very good pick in my opinion. So, moving along, I have 3 more picks left. I need 1 tier 5, and I have 2 free agents left, which are most likely going to be tier 4 and tier 5 respectively. And I was thinking to myself, I was kind of going back to the whole hazard stack idea, and I was like, okay, Cloyster can hazard stack, obviously, and I figured, okay, I need a way so I can prevent hazard removal or hazard control from my opponent's side. And what I mean by that is, I want something to spin block, and I also want something to deter defog. You obviously can't block defog, but you can definitely deter it away in some way, and I'll be getting into that soon. But for spin blockers, you have a couple options for that. You can get something like a Rough Skin Mon, for example, say Druddigon. That's an option that I kind of considered for a little bit, but ultimately I went for the tried and true spin blocker, being a Ghost type, and in this kind, in this case, I decided to go for Cofagrigus. Now, what Cofagrigus is really nice is, first of all, big defense stat. Not a very good HP stat, but I can mess around with EVs for that. And its defense stat is naturally very good, so it can naturally tank stuff pretty well. Cofagrigus, it gives me fighting immunity, which is nice for the team. It gives me a normal immunity, which is also really nice, again, for Rapid Spin, so that I can keep my hazards up and continue to pressure my opponents. Cofagrigus itself, it gets nice moves such as Will-O-Wisp. It gets Trick Room options, that's Trick. It gets Trick Room options as well as Nasty Plot, so if I really want to, a 95 special attack with Nasty Plot is going to be really nice. So late game, for example, I can bring this thing in, Nasty Plot, Trick Room, and from there, this thing can start taking over with stuff like Shadow Ball or even Hex, because I do have that Toxic Spike support. So I can go for something like Hex, which hits a lot of Pokemon hard because its power doubles if my opponent has a status ailment. So it's going to be really nice for Cofagrigus to have Hex at times. Shadow Ball is obviously more consistent, but wherever I can fit it in, I can definitely put in Hex. But the main reason I really want a Cofagrigus is for its ability. Mummy is a very interesting ability in that if something touches Cofagrigus with a move, its ability gets swapped out. And a lot of the Pokemon in this format have broken abilities. Stuff like, say, Metagross's Tough Claws, stuff like Beast Boost from the Ultra Beast like Pheromosa, Cortana, stuff like, say, I can't really think of one off the top of my head. Tough Claws for Mega Charizard X, sure. Just abilities like that. And once they touch Cofagrigus, with how fat its defense is, they get those abilities taken away, and they become significantly less powerful as a result. So I think that's one of the main reasons why Cofagrigus is going to be really good. Obviously, the Ghost type for spin blocking is great. The option of doing Trick Room is going to be really good because not everything on his team is super fast, obviously. Magearna is also a Trick Roomer that can function well with Cofagrigus, so I do believe those two can work fairly well together. Besides that, not much defensive synergy, but I do believe Cofagrigus is going to be really good for the team. And now, for my last two picks, which are basically tier 5 picks at this point. I knew that I can always get a good tier 5, to be honest with you. It's kind of hard to look and dig around for them, but there's always like one or two tier 5s that I always have my eyes on, and for this instance, I wanted, like I said, a defog deterrent, something that I wanted to kind of make my opponent stay away from defog, or at least make them second guess while they're thinking about clicking defog to get rid of my hazards. So usually when you think about that, you think of two things. You think of either contrary, because if you switch into contrary, your evasion goes up and it makes your opponent's life hell because they can't hit their moves with your evasion boosted. And second, the second way to deter defog a little bit is by using a defiant or competitive Pokemon. So, you know, stuff like, in the upper tiers you can use something like Bisharp, Milotic, and that's pretty much the two best ones I can think of in upper tiers. But in lower tiers, you got quite a few competitive and defiant Pokemon, and the one that I decided to go with, the fighting type of the tier being Primeape for tier 5. Pretty nice, getting this thing for tier 5. Primeape is decently strong, it's decently fast. I can do something like Scarf to it, so I can do a late game sweep with it. And if I'm Scarf with Defiant, that's going to be really scary for my opponent, because with Defiant, my opponent's going to have to second guess again clicking Defog. Because if they click Defog on a plus and make my Primeape go to +2, that's not going to be nice for them, you know. Close combat is no joke from Primeape, let me tell you right now. Primeape, of course, also gets U-turn. It doesn't get knockoff, which is a little unfortunate, but what it does get that some fighting types don't do is Ice Punch, which is really good for hitting those flying types and ground types, i.e. Landers, Gligar, Gliscor, stuff like that, for instance. Another interesting option that it gets for whatever reason is Gunk Shot. Gunk Shot, which helps to combat the various types. This thing is pretty much always going to be an offensive role on the team. Primeape is very one-dimensional. You can't really do too much to mix this thing up. I'm pretty much always going to have to run Defiant. Maybe bring a Vital Spirit in a matchup where Sleep is a little bit of an issue, but besides that, I'm pretty much always going to go with Defiant, because that's like its main purpose on the team, I guess you could say. So, yeah, besides that, Primeape, overall, pretty interesting mon. It gets some interesting moves too, which, you know, maybe I'll abuse in one way or another, but Primeape, it's a good fighting type again. It helps me clean up because I didn't have a fighting type at this point. It gives me another Dark Resist, though a very not good one at that. So it's a decent one though. And fighting type obviously is really great for draft teams. So, and of course, my very last 11th pick of the team, I realized maybe I should pick up another Psychic Resist. Now, yes, I do have Magearna and I do have two other Psychic types, but I wanted an immunity to it. I wanted a Dark type, obviously. And at this point, Dark types were kind of running low because, you know, all the good Dark types are in the upper tiers. Stuff like Tyranitar, Bisharp, stuff like, I don't know, Honchkrow. You know, those kinds of things are already taken up. So I figured there's not too much left in Tier 5. Tier 5, some of the Dark types that I considered were Shiftry because it gives me another Defogger, which I didn't think I needed, but, you know, it's nice to have. It also gets stuff like Sucker Punch. It gets Knockoff, it gets a strong secondary stab in Grass. The second one I thought it was Cacturn. A Cacturn is a little different from Shiftry because it gives you a water immunity, because it has Water Absorb. It is slower by a significant amount, and it doesn't have Chlorophyll, but it does have Spikes, which is something that's really interesting. So I was like, it's one of those two. And then I thought about, okay, maybe what if I go with something like Liepard? Now, Liepard, not the greatest Pokemon in the world, I will admit. It's pretty weak. It's got a pretty decent speed stat, and outside of that, it doesn't really do its purpose. But as a Dark type, you know, it's not too bad. You could definitely do a lot worse for a Dark type than Liepard. So Prankster, obviously, nice ability. In a Prankster matchup, or like a Prankster mirror match, I guess you can say, Liepard's a Dark type, so it can't get affected by Prankster. This also makes me Speaking of that, though, if I do equip Prankster, I'm gonna have to be careful around opposing dark types because all my status moves won't affect them. So that's something I have to be really careful about. But Liepard, you know, one of the couple Pokemon to get Thunder Wave Prankster, Thunder Wave Taunt, not Swagger, that's banned. But it also gets something like Foul Play, U-Turn. Another really interesting aspect about it is Pursuit. I really want a Pursuit for the team because if my opponent has like a key psychic threat that I want to get out of the way, Liepard helps me create those kind of 50-50 scenarios, and Liepard can really help me to eliminate psychic types that I really don't want to deal with on my team. And outside of that, Liepard doesn't have a whole lot going for it. It has some gimmicky sets like Nasty Plot Copycat, which I think is a set that is ran like here and there in like the super low tiers. But besides that, you know, Liepard, it's just kind of here. Psychic Immunity, Pursuit Trapper, all around good like a utility, anti-stall kind of Pokemon, I guess, in a sense. So that's going to be the end of my draft analysis. However, I'm really excited for Safari Zone League. Just to be playing again in this is really, really cool. I'm just really glad to be playing Pokemon again, you know? So hope you guys enjoyed the draft analysis. Please leave any kind of feedback that you want to give me. You know, anything works for me, you know, and especially since I'm just starting to do this YouTube kind of thing, I really would appreciate any kind of feedback that you can give back for the video. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and I'll be back next time for my Week 1 Team Builder and Battle Analysis versus Word Life. So stay tuned for that, and yeah, I will see you all later. Peace out.